So we met each other.
This is funny because this is a version of the story we've never told before.
Yeah, but this is the truth.
This is the great.
But the irony is like losing balance is what brings you into balance. I can reflect on my own life and see that in so many ways of like every single time I was so off balance. That is what taught me balance.
These things are all so cool and they feel great as a theory and they make you feel so good as a theory. But it's another thing to actually implement and then put it into practice. And I think that's what these last 10 years have been about.
I could trick myself all day long about how spiritual and peaceful and grounded and centered and like enlightened choices I make, that he holds up a mirror and really shows me when like I'm not being accountable to the self-reflection that I am saying I am doing.
Hello, welcome. We are so glad you are here, and we are so excited about the guests on today's episode of the podcast.
These are two of the most amazing people that we've ever had the opportunity of meeting, and we're really grateful to call them friends. When we started the podcast, they were our dream first guests, and luckily they agreed to come on the show, and we get to share them with you now.
They're the best-selling authors of the spiritual self-help books, The Inner Work, and their new one, The Inner Work of Relationships. They're Matt and Ash, better known to their online community of over 1 million people as the Yoga Couple.
Their books have helped so many people, us included, and we were incredibly excited to be able to sit down and get to learn a little bit more about them and their journey.
They show up beautifully on this episode and open up about what their life was like before they met, how they came together, and what an incredible story that is, and all the things that surfaced that they had to navigate and work through to get to where they are now, including stories that they've never shared before.
They've already sold over 20,000 copies of their new book, and you can go buy yours right now on Amazon, TikTok Shop, or Instagram. By the end of this episode, we guarantee that you're going to see your relationship different and see how you can actually show up in your relationship differently.
We love you, Matt and Ash. Thank you so much for being our first guests.
Now, everybody, sit back and relax because you're going to love this episode. Here we go with Matt and Ash, the Yoga Couple.
There were nights we would fight, no end.
How excited are you two about the baby? Like, I know we've chatted a little bit about it, but I want to hear about like where you're at with it right now. And
yeah, so to be honest, like the original, like finding out we were pregnant, we were really scared and we didn't know if we were going to have kids. Like we were super undecided about that.
Yeah, I mean, we waited like 10 years.
Yeah, so
so we took our time deciding that.
Like we were like so close to just not, having kids.
Yeah, we actually once when we had the first miscarriage experience, we kind of like we were like, all right, maybe we are going to be childless for life, and that's cool. We're okay with that. And maybe that's going to be our path.
And we thought maybe it was a sign too. We
were like, we tried.
Hey, it's not meant to be.
Tried. It didn't work.
And so I think when we found out we were actually pregnant this time, it took us a while to like reconcile that because we had already made peace with like a whole future of being child free. We had already like, oh, this is what we're going to do with our life. Like we're going to travel the world. Like
we're just going to devote to our work.
We're going to write all these
focus
books.
on writing and we're just going to do that. And we like had a whole path figured out.
And we totally released like, we're probably not going to have kids. And then surprise, we were pregnant and it like took us a minute to adjust. Like there was like half of us that was like excited and there was half of us that I think that was like grieving this other life that we had
just
thought
fully
we were gonna
envisioned.
Yeah. And then but then once it settled in, we like got back on the family mode and we're like, no, this is gonna be awesome. And like as time goes on, I think we're more and more excited and settling into it and like thinking about what our future is going to be like as a family and we are excited. But yeah, to be honest, like there was definitely both. Like there was like grief and excitement simultaneously.
Yeah. And then we found out that it's a boy. So
we're having a boy.
That became pretty cool. We originally, like both thought for sure it was going to be a girl. Like a lot of our family thought it was going to be a girl. And we even had girl names picked out. We were like dialed. We were like, okay, we're having a daughter. And I think personally,
that's what I thought.
Oh, really? Same?
We totally thought that. Yeah. Steph and I talked about it afterwards and it was like, oh, they're having a girl.
Yeah. Everybody thought
even
that.
You guys thought, okay.
We thought that too.
Yeah. So we really thought that. And I think we had been on the topic of like getting with the vision. We had envisioned a whole life. Like I was like, all right, I'm a girl dad. I got a daughter. Like I was like envisioning the whole thing. I was letting go of all my like fantasies of initiating a man. And I was like, okay, I'm going to let go of that. I'm not going to get to initiate a son. And now we really tripped out when we found out it was a boy, and that also took us a long time because we were like, wait, it's
So
a
turns
boy.
out
So
we don't know anything, and this
Yeah.
kid is already teaching us.
yeah, we're like,
Whatever you think you know
surrender.
is gonna happen is not gonna happen, and just surrender and keep going. Like, we're already having that happen, like before this baby's even here. So
Yeah.
I guess that is now the next, like, the rest of our life.
Yeah, the process has been like, have an idea of what's gonna happen, and then
Nope.
also none of it probably will. But it will be even better. That's the catch. It will be even better.
Yes, I love that. Craig's got a saying that fits perfectly into that. It's like things rarely turn out how you think they will. You might have to correct me. I'm going to butcher it. It's things rarely turn out the way you think they're going to, but they almost always turn out better than you thought they were. Or they rarely turn out how you expected them, and they turn out better. He used to say it all the time. Sometimes we're on the same
page, babe.
You used to say it all the time.
What is this one? I'm not sure. I don't remember this one.
It was back in Utah, so it was a while, and it was like one of those things of like, I thought this was going to happen. I thought this was happen, and you just have to like write it out, and always it ends up working out better than you could have even imagined. And so,
yeah, I think from now on, I'm just going to be like, oh, like as soon as I have an idea, I'm going to be like, oh, that's probably not going to happen now because I had that idea. So just,
right?
That's probably not it, actually.
Yeah, that's the way this podcast was like created. Was we had an idea where we were ending the other show. Actually, we weren't even going to end the other show. We were going to just redesign and kind of like improve the other show with a new little set and kind of hang a new tapestry. And we had all these kind of like little ideas that we were going to do to kind of improve the show. And then it just all changed. So everything we originally had planned, everything that we were headed for the 2024, it all just went in the dumpster. And then we had to start this and create this and kind of get in line with this. And even that process was like, I was thinking about it today where it's like we were originally thinking we were going to launch in January. And then like January came and went, and it was like, oh, maybe it's going to be February. We're going to shoot by the end of February. We were planning how we were going to have you guys come on in February and all these kind of different things. And it's just all out the window. And we just had to let go and trust. And eventually it all started to come together and kind of fit and work. And hopefully it's going to continue to be that way. But
well, congratulations, you guys. It's super awesome. And we're really grateful to be here. Really honored to be your first guest.
We're so grateful that you guys are here. Yes. So let's get into it because
let's do this.
We want to learn more about, you guys have been together for just over a decade, right?
Yeah, this is our 11th year.
I don't even remember. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Do you remember what year you met?
2013.
2013 or something?
2013, yeah.
Yeah.
So we got together right around the same time because we met in 2011 and we started dating in 2012 and then we got married in 2015.
No way.
So
we probably got married in 2015 too.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Did you?
I think so. Yeah.
I don't remember. Yes.
I think it's 2015 when we got legally married. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
That's way cool. I always get the year mixed up too, Ash. I'm like, is it 2014 or 2015? It just, my brain has a hard time grabbing it. I remember it was an 8, and so then I have to count it out. Like 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, it was 2015.
I just Googled how old I was the other day. So, there's like the website you can type in your birthday and it will tell you the right year. I'm 35.
Oh my gosh.
Math's hard.
Oh, that's awesome.
Math is legit hard.
Yeah. I'm good at other things.
So good.
Drop us into Matt and Ash when the two of you first met. What's going on in your lives? Where are you at? What's good? What's bad?
Yeah, it's funny. There's so much of our past that as a joke, like I'm just like, oh, I don't even know who those people are anymore. Can we just block that out? But yeah, there was a lot of beautiful to it all too. So okay, we'll focus on all of it.
Yeah, we were young, so we were like 20.
I think lately, like the reason, the backstory of why I'm saying that is because the last couple weeks specifically of our life right now, we've just been really tripping out on how ridiculously different we've grown to be with each other over the years, and how we reflect on older versions of ourselves, which evidently we'll definitely get into today. And we look at all these chapters and we're just like, dude, who was that? Like, I wouldn't even know that person right now. I wouldn't even like recognize him or her. So going back in time to immature or more less mature than we are now, but still the same vision. That's what's been cool. I think that's what's held us together is we had the same values, same vision, and they have proved themselves over time to transform us. So in the beginning when we met, I was actively seeking to get married. Like I was dating to marry, I always call it. And we were both like, we're only 20 days apart. So we're like the same age. So we were both 24,
maybe
24, something like that.
you know.
And I had a blog. I was like writing. I had just left all these like school, like the med school, the master's program. I was all in on like spiritual enlightenment. And one of the epiphanies I had is that in that pursuit, it was like chasing after this samadhi, this bliss, and these beautiful experiences. But somewhere along the line, I started to have this feeling of like, there was a lot of times where I thought I was going to like die and leave my body. But then once I realized like I'm still here, I was like, well, then what's the point of being so happy and like focusing on this stuff if you don't have someone to share it with? And so that's what pivoted me to be like, well, then I would need to get married. I need a spiritual companion to share all this love with and these concepts with. And then lo and behold, so I was writing about it on a blog.
So basically what Matt's trying to say is we were both spiritual delulu. Like when we met, we were spiritually delusional, both of us. We were like way too deep into it. We were young. We both,
but with like a pure vision and a pure intention.
Yeah, our hearts were pure, but like we found, yogic teachings, spiritual teachings. Matt literally thought he was gonna like leave his body.
I thought I was like, cool. Do I leave now? Like, what do I do? Like,
yeah, like okay, I know.
Like there were so many times I'd be in meditation, being like, okay, do I exit now? Like, do I leave? Like, I feel like I can leave now. Let's go.
Okay.
And it's like
the part where I leave the body, right?
And that's why you need a teacher.
Which was not there
in physical form.
Yeah, so we're just being honest, right? I was a yoga teacher. Yeah. He was like, gonna leave his body and transcend. So we met each other.
This is funny because this is a version of the story we've never told before.
Yeah, but this is the truth.
This is the great. I think it's maybe because you guys know us on a more personal level, and our yoga. Our relationship with yoga. I think that this is cool. We're telling the story in a way we've never told it before because you guys would understand the context.
Yeah. So I met him online.
So she finds the blog on accident.
This just sounds like it needs a docuseries. So please don't we don't want a cult docuseries.
Yeah, we want to make sure and sign all permission bad. For any of that.
So I found him online and he had this blog about spiritual concepts and enlightenment, consciousness, yeah. Right? And it's still good. But who we were back then, it's laughable, right? But
I would just say the truth is still the truth. It's just that we weren't grounded.
We didn't understand
our humanness, which is why I think we now with the inner work do focus so much on practicality, groundedness, being a human. And making your humanness enlightened, making your humanness the goal. And that's why I think we both were drawn to Tantra yoga eventually, because that is the principle of Tantra yoga is there is no somewhere else to go. So me wanting to leave my body was a misunderstanding. And it was you don't go anywhere, bro. It's now, it's always now. So how can you make your life your enlightenment? How can you make your life enlightened? Right, rather than being enlightenment is somewhere else, it's out of this human body. And that's why we do speak about the spiritual community so much and how it's always chasing. And it's because we relate, we get it, we did that too, and we thought that it's somewhere in something else, rather than Tantra yoga specifically approach of no, your bliss, your enlightenment is here in being human. So she finds the blog. She reaches out on Facebook. Yeah, question.
Ash, how did are we just Googling spiritual blogs of
in the present
future husbands? What are you searching out to find the blog?
Okay, so let's rewind and we're gonna stay in the story. Matt, we're gonna get to how we're not that anymore. Don't worry. Okay. People are gonna know that we're not that anymore. It's okay.
I want to make sure and clear that right away.
Okay, so this really bad too. I had a boyfriend. I lived with my boyfriend. We had a dog. We we had a life together, but we were on the verge of breaking up, basically. Like we worked different shifts. He worked night shift, I worked day shift, or vice versa. We were both in the industry in Vegas. That's what they call it when you work in nightclubs and day clubs. I was a bottle service girl. I worked at Marquee Day and Nightclub, and I served bottle service day and night.
And he was like bar manager.
Yeah. And then he worked in, hospitality. So we didn't really see each other. And I was feeling really unfulfilled. And I was getting really deeper into my, yoga journey. I was also teaching yoga classes like on the side. And I was like, gosh, I got to get out of this city. Like the reason why I was working that job was because I wanted to save enough money to open a yoga studio. And in Las Vegas hospitality, you can make a lot of money. So I was like, okay, I'm going to work, for summer, and I'm going to save up all this money, and I'm going to open a yoga studio. And he was just not on that path. He got hired to be the tour manager for Miley Cyrus. And so we were at a crossroads of, he's either going to go, travel the world and be with Miley Cyrus. I'm going to, leave this whole industry and go do my spiritual journey. And we were just like not on the same path. And it was kind of unspokenly there. So I had a journal, and I was, manifesting every day and writing about my dream life. And I would write, I want to be with a partner who's on this path with me. Like I'm ready to let this person go, even though we thought we were going to be together and maybe we're going to get married. If it's not this person, I'm ready to let them go. Or if he has a change of heart, like I want this life for us. And it was just not heading in that direction. So I would write about this. And I got to a point where I was like, I need to take space from him and decide if we're going to break up. So I was looking up a yoga retreat center where I could go process and get the courage to be alone and be away and decide, am I going to move out? I mean, at that age, it was really intimidating because bills and money and we were sharing things. And I was like, man, can I move out on my own and break up and all these things? And so I felt really intimidated by it, but I was Googling a, retreat center I could go to process and think about these things and heal and just take space. So I'm Googling White Lotus Retreat Center because I had gotten recommendations about it. It was in Santa Barbara. And I couldn't remember the exact name. So I'm like, White Lotus, yoga, healing, whatever center. And Matt's website comes up. I didn't know that though. I clicked on the website. And instead of it being a retreat center website, it was just endless blogs on inner work and consciousness and self-healing. And of course, me in that state of mind where I had this big decision I wanted to make, I just sat there for hours and just kept reading it. And I felt wow, God led me to this website, which is true, so still so true. And I got really into it. And I was like, man, maybe this is my teacher. This must be my guru. Oh my gosh, because, being, into the yoga world at the time was looking and waiting. That was another thing I really wanted was who's going to be my guru? Who's going to be my teacher? When the student's ready, the guru reveals himself. And so I just had this longing and desire for a teacher so freaking bad, which is the irony of the whole thing is you're not supposed to feel that way. You're supposed to just be unattached and not need this. And I was so attached to this. And I thought, oh, this is probably my guru. This is probably my teacher because I was led here. And so I'm trying to find out who this guy is because he doesn't have any information about him. It's just this random website with all of this information. And so I went on a stalking journey to figure out who freaking A wrote this blog. And then these pictures were coming up on Google. And this is Facebook era. There wasn't TikTok. I don't even know if I had an Instagram yet. And no, I don't think so. It was just Facebook. And so these pictures come up of him, 24 years old, handsome, blonde, 6'3", with his shirt off, probably hiking Mount Shasta, being a yogi, sitting in lotus meditation
smiling
pose,
look
crazy
all the
Jesus.
time.
I'm who is this? And I'm is this really the person who wrote that? And so then I got on Facebook. I Googled his name. Then I friend requested him like a stalker. He accepted it.
Oh, I love you, Ash.
And we started DMing each other on Facebook. And that's a long story short, but his
I don't know, that was the longest version we've ever told.
Okay, but his message to me, we were way into it, right? He was like, hi goddess, how did you find me? And I was like, oh my gosh, and we divinely synchronicity.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
Let me now tell. Hold on, I think we're
No,
jumping.
that was enough.
Well, hold
That
on,
was
real
good.
quick. The real reason, but this is relevant to this part's really interesting, just even for us to look back on, because it really shows how you and your partner have so much karma together, and you have like a destiny together. The biggest thing that I'll never forget is, yes, she adds me on Facebook, and we don't actually say anything for a minute because people were finding the blog and randomly adding me every once in a while. So I didn't really do anything. What tripped me out was her posts and listening to how she wrote about her life and yoga tripped me out, because it was as if I was reading my own writing, like in a journal. And it was uncanny, like word choice and dialect and style.
Which is funny because we write books together now.
Thank
so
you. That's why I really wanted to
like,
point this out, because it's so weird, because it was so uncanny how identical we expressed ourselves and wrote, specifically like how we would write our posts. Because I was also, back in that time, my Facebook posts were all like spiritual. They were like yogic teachings.
Sometimes I was trying to like get your
and
attention. I mean, like, come on. Like, I was like, I hope
doing
he
this stuff
sees
too.
this.
But what was trippy is how identical it was. And that's what finally made me reach out and be like, who are you? Like, I have to know more of who you are.
I know the same
because
things
like
you know.
the way you talk about this is really tripping me out, because you're the first girl I've ever met who like can express it like this. Like, this is trippy. And that's really what led us down this whole path together. And lo and behold, it's like, oh, because you guys were going to write this stuff together, you're going to author books together. And it makes perfect sense why God like aligned us, because of course we're going to write together, because we have the exact same style, and we blend perfectly together to be able to do that.
Okay, that's we should stop talking. That was a lot.
There's
You're
so
doing
many
an
things.
amazing
Like,
job, first of all. I am loving hearing this. I am loving your journey. I'm loving hearing this parts of you. And I feel like there's so many times that the roads that you take to get to each other, like, aren't always the kind that you want to just like put out there and be like, oh, this is perfect. This is a story. There's a lot of times that those roads are full of obstacles and like, holy shit, what was I doing? What was I thinking? And it normalizes everybody's journey to be like, yeah, we were at different places. Of course, you were in your 20s. How are you supposed to? You're in your 20s. You're coming into that. You're investigating what is coming up in your heart and your soul, and breaching out of everything that you've been taught in a different way, and being aligned and pulled together. And sometimes it is like a little cringe. Craig and I have some pretty cringy moments. We're like, that's what we did. That's how we got here. But now we get to see it. So I love that you're telling it in such an honest way. And it feels so relatable, even though it's a different story, that way of like, ooh, to how we got here, how we're connecting, and how divine. Like, 'cause as you're telling it, we see this in the way, and I know you see it now too. It's so clear of how you were absolutely guided. Like, these things were taking place. I mean, you can't unsee how beautiful it is that you got pulled together in that moment. So I'm loving this.
There's so many things. Like, it's so funny because this is we used to do this all the time on those training calls, because like Stephanie has so much that she wants to say. I'm like, I want to say something. I want to say something. I want to say stuff. I got stuff that I want to say. But listening to the story, we can relate a lot to it. And I think a lot of people can. One of the things that really stands out to me is it's so much easier looking back, right, and seeing all the little synchronistic things that align to guide you to the place where, because I mean, there's a lot that has to happen for the two of you to meet, right? I mean, Ash is in Vegas. Matt, where are you?
I was in Northern California.
Okay. So, I mean, a lot has to happen, right? The inspiration to go online and create a blog and start, sharing your thoughts, right? All of these kind of different things have to line up so that the two of you meet. And not only that, but like in your own personal lives, things kind of have to start not falling apart in a sense, right? But shit has to happen in order for all of this to take place. And the thing that I really want to learn, or I want to hear more about, is because both of you at that phase in your life are seeking spiritual enlightenment, are seeking more, are looking for answers, are going towards whatever is out there to try to understand, I'm guessing probably yourselves, trying to understand life. What is the catalyst for that? Like in your mid-20s, what is pushing you guys? Because Steph and I had like our spiritual awakening, but it was in our 30s, and it was literally around the same time frame as you two are meeting, is when the two of us not only meet but kind of go through this big spiritual awakening as well. And then we navigate that obviously and do the best that we can to not end up in a train wreck. But what is driving both of you to seek that stuff, so then that leads you down these paths and down these roads to eventually meeting in this space?
Yeah, our youngest little kitten just came in, so hopefully he'll behave and be chill. Yeah, so man, that's a rewind question for sure. So that would take us back. I mean, shoot, I guess for me, that goes back to childhood. I think, so I was raised super religious, and to answer your question, what is the craving? What is the catalyst? I think it's to know the truth. I think it's a craving for truth. It's a craving for wanting to know what is actually going on in this reality. And so being raised with religion, you're being told what the truth is, but it doesn't necessarily always feel right. It doesn't feel true, right? It doesn't feel like the truth, because the truth should be recognizable. It should be palpable. It should have a sensation to it. And it does, come to find out. And so I think I was craving the truth, and I could feel that some stuff wasn't true in religion, or in the particular religion I was being raised in. And so I think what happened was, and this is really what built the inner work, there were so many side effects to these teachings that were negative. They had issues like guilt and shame and all this shitty shit. And it was supposed to be true and love. And it was like, this is supposed to be pure. This is supposed to be God. And yet the side effects were ripping my teenage soul apart. And I was just like so distraught over the guilt and the shame and the lying that it was generating inside of me, because it wasn't safe to be human. I need to be like Christ. I need to be perfect. And mom and dad are strict, and my dad's a cop. And it's like, it's intense, and I'm going to get spanked, and there's all these side effects. There's all these side effects to this type of being raised. And so I think for me, I was craving to get out of my parents' roof, get out of this religion and see more. I wanted to see more, because I wanted to feel if God is really love, this sure doesn't feel like love. If this is really the truth, it sure doesn't feel like the truth, because it feels like I'm being manipulated. It feels like there's deceit happening here. And so if we were to really go down that road, yeah, that's what was the catalyst, was the pain. Something's off here. Something's weird, which then made me graduate high school early, because I was like, I got to get the fuck out of this house. And that led me to going to college at 15, starting that journey so I could hurry up and get into med school, because I wanted to be a doctor. And then as soon as possible, I think at 17, so I did like 2 years or 3 years of community college first, because it was 15. I can't like move yet. So then after I got that out of the way, I finally could move away at like 17 or 18, right around there, and moved to go to school or go to university somewhere else. And then same thing, once I was out from under their roof, craving, man, truth. What's the truth? What's the truth? Are these teachings real? What's the side effects? And just experimenting like crazy, trying to figure out what is true and what is not. And then if we were to speed that up over the next like 6 years from then on, I'm in graduate programs, and I'm in med school, naturopathic medical school. I'm in a master's program for being a therapist, and I'm being exposed to more. This is the truth. This is the truth. This is this, right? And I'm just like seeking and obsessively craving knowledge and truth, whether it's about healing, because I want to be a doctor, whether it's about healing the mind, because I was into psychiatry. I worked in psychiatry for a year before med school. There was just cameo, Cosmo cameo. So that was my journey. It was just this like obsessive craving. And then by learning new stuff and realizing this isn't it, learning new stuff, this isn't it. This little bit of this was taking the gems as I went along the way. And that catches us back up to when I met Ash is I had already been going on that journey of shedding and trying to find distilling what was true, because a lot of what I was raised being taught was true. A lot of it was true. It was the presentation that was hurtful. It's how it was taught that was hurtful, which is why we're so passionate about the inner work and why we are so excited to be parents, because you can have beautiful teachings, but if you teach them tainted with shame and guilt and tainted with different consciousness, it distorts the teaching. And you take some, this is why you can have a pastor read the same scripture. You could have each theme of consciousness read that same scripture, and they'll interpret it 15 different ways, type of thing. And it's not the teaching itself necessarily that is not true. It's the lens of consciousness that is teaching it. So it was funny full circle for me, because I realized that a lot of what I was taught was actually really beautiful and genuine. But when it gets skewed with shame and guilt, it destroys it. So now coming back to Ash, and then she'll tell you her story, which is totally different, but the same kind of search. She was so healing for me because she allowed me that unconditional love to say, hey, go ahead. Because she was raised this way of like, why don't you try it? Let's talk about it and see if you feel like it's right, rather than me telling you this is what it is, or telling you this is what the truth is. Why don't we experiment with it? Then you feel if it's true or not. Why don't you feel if it's true or not? Because you shouldn't have to force that. If it's true, you'll know it in your heart. You'll be like, wow, this feels really pure. This feels right. So that was my whole thing. And then that leads us up to meeting. And now let's hear Ash's. And then same thing, that probably goes back to when you were a teenager too. Or I guess, did we want to pause first?
No, please.
Yes.
Okay, so I grew up in Vegas, and my parents are, they're awesome people, but they definitely have their own struggles with substances. And so my mom had a narcotics addiction my, whole life. I didn't know that until I was older. And it did, get into other kinds of drugs and things, and, pills, and even like street drugs. And my dad, has an alcohol problem, which we didn't recognize either until, I was an adult, because it was just normal. Like that was just the type of environment I grew up in Vegas. Like most people's parents work, on the strip, downtown, like drinking and substances and drugs is just like a part of daily life. And I was definitely raised in an environment like that, and nobody thought anything of it. But there were so many negative side effects growing up. My mom had so many health issues. There was so much turbulence in their marriage. There was so much dysfunction. And, I didn't grow up with a routine. I didn't grow up with like present parenting. They worked opposite shifts. And I didn't have any siblings. So I was home alone a lot, or by myself a lot, just unsupervised. I didn't have a lot of guidance of like, are you going to do your homework? Are you even going to school today? Like nobody was like checking on me in that regard. And as a side effect of that, looking back now, I can see I developed an overcompensating, coping mechanism. I became like hyper responsible and like super independent and really driven. And like, I was senior class president. I was president of every school I was in from elementary school. I was in competitive cheer. I was in competitive dance. I was on student council. I got good grades, like, and nobody was checking on me. I was just like doing all of this. And I was just very motivated and very driven, because I could see the dysfunction in my parents' lives. And I can also see it like in the city and like in my friends' families' lives, like constant just dysfunction. And what Matt grew up in this like picket fence, white picket fence, perfect little family in suburbia that goes to church on Sunday. Like to me, I would look at his family and be like, I wish I had that. Like I want to like wake up and make breakfast, on Sunday and go to church, and I get home from school and someone
have a routine
and somebody asks me if I did my homework, and like I wanted that so bad, and I did not have anything like that. Like,
and I just wanted your freedom.
Yeah.
I would have done anything to have that level of freedom.
My parents were and we have such a good relationship today, and they've gotten their substance issues a lot more under control, and my mom is sober from drugs now because of yoga, which I'll follow back on. But I was allowed to drink, like I was allowed to smoke weed. Nobody cared if I had sex. Like the first time I had sex, I came home and I said I had sex. Like it was like we were all friends, not like we were parents and children. It was kind of like we were all roommates. And so me growing up like that, I became very motivated to not be like them in a way. Like I wanted to have my shit together. I wanted to be healthy. I didn't see them as healthy. I wanted to be sober. I wanted to have spirituality in my life. I wanted to have God in my life. Like none of that was there. So when I got my driver's license at 16 years old, the first thing I did was create a list of questions about religion and spirituality. And I drove every weekend to different religious groups in my city and interviewed the head of that religion. I would set up appointments and I would ask like every question I had about God and like, well, why are some people born into poverty and some people aren't? And like, what about like drug addiction and like, what about abuse? And like, I had so many questions about like, if God loves us, like, why is this shit happening? And it led me on a journey of religious exploration. I started attending all of these different religions simultaneously. I was going to Jehovah's Witnesses on Wednesdays and Sundays. I was going to the Buddhist temple. I was with the Hare Krishna studying the Bhagavad Gita. I was at a born again, church, the mega church I was so busy with religions. Like I was a part of any religion that was available in Las Vegas. I was a part of it. I went to it. I had so many friends and so many like events all the time. And what it led me to yoga. I started doing Jivamukti yoga, through like Hare Krishna and chanting and the Bhagavad Gita and all these things. I learned about yoga. I started practicing yoga at this donation yoga center it was a Jivamukti yoga center. And it's a very spiritual type of yoga where there is asana, but there's also prayer and singing and chanting. And I had my first experience of that samadhi, like in Shavasana. And so I was probably like 16 or 17 years old. And I felt like I was on drugs. Like I was like, why do they need to take drugs? Like this is drugs. Like, oh my gosh. With that experience, I kind of dropped all the other religious studies and got really deep into yoga philosophy and Hinduism and anything that was from the East. Like I wanted to learn more about that because I had an internalized experience of like knowing God like within me. I understood. There are no words to explain it. I just understood. Versus when I was going to the more Christian type churches and like learning about God and like God was someone out there, and I just didn't resonate with it as much. And so it's not that I rejected Jesus, and I do have a relationship with like Christ, now and even then, but it was from a Hindu yogic lens. Like I saw him differently than I was being taught in the Christian churches. And that exposure to the Eastern religions allowed me to have my own unique interpretation of things. Like I would go to all these different churches and I wouldn't take it verbatim for what they were saying. I was like leaning on my understanding of context clues from all the different world religions. And it was helping me understand things much differently. And so I started yoga teacher training. I became a yoga teacher for my graduation. My teacher gave me the Bhagavad Gita that Paramahansa Yogananda wrote. And I got really into Paramahansa Yogananda and still am. And so I was just on this journey of, self-realization. And I didn't know where it was going to lead. I was in Vegas. There wasn't that much yoga there. Like these are like small little nooks and corners at the time. It wasn't that popular. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, but I just knew like I wanted to contribute to that. And I had this vision of opening a yoga studio. So at the time I was a preschool teacher, and, I was cute, I was hot, and I was like, I can like work downtown. Like I can get a job. All these girls are making all this money. And so I applied and I got a job working, at Marquee at the clubs, and I started saving so that I could open a yoga studio. And that's where Matt came into my life. So I went from like preschool teacher yogi to like working like double shifts in like literally like the biggest nightclub in Las Vegas at the time, Marquee. I was like serving these big DJs, like any big DJ name, like they were playing at Marquee, and I was like in this totally other like environment. And I remember working in that environment, and I worked day club and nightclub back to back. I would make thousands of dollars in cash tips. I'd be walking out of Marquee with like $4,000 in my backpack cash, like walking down the strip, like in high heels and like basically like stripper clothes. And I was just, in this like juxtaposition of when I was there at the nightclubs, I would have these like profound like enlightenment moments of like being still like amongst the chaos and like being in the world but not of it. And I was having all these teachings in my head as I was in this like in like the heart of the world, basically, of like our ego and desire and like lust and greed and like gambling and like substances and like the really extreme version of like what my parents had been exposed to. And I was like making peace with it all, just like so much peace and so much gratitude. And like it was just so beautiful. And so I met Matt, and when we met online, we decided we were going to merge our lives together and open that yoga studio.
Yeah,
like
after we met, I moved to Vegas a month later. We moved in together. I got a job being a teacher at a private school
where I was a preschool teacher.
And then she was able to transition, and like 6 months later we started opening our first yoga studio, and off we went.
Yeah.
Did you say a month later after meeting, a month later you were moving there? And
yes. That's another part of us meeting. We just knew immediately. We talked for a month. We wrote back and forth, and then it got to a point, and that's what Ash was joking about earlier. Like our first questions, because I was dating to marry, like I said, and one of the biggest things I kept running into when I was dating people is she could be so beautiful, she could be so intelligent, but if there wasn't a spiritual thing, that's always what made me have to move on. So I started getting tired of that, and the first question I asked Ash, this is what she was trying to joke about earlier, is I literally was like, what is the purpose of life to you? What is God to you? Like, I just wanted to get to it. Like, because if we can't vibe on this, I don't even want to invest all my time and energy. That's why it was so powerful for us to be tripping out on the same thing, because I wanted to find someone who tripped out on this just as much as me and who was just as fascinated by it. And sure enough, hearing her story, you're like, clearly she cared.
And I was writing in my journal every day these prayers of like, I'm ready to be with this person. And so when I accidentally landed on his website, like as I was trying to process like leaving the person I was with and starting this new life, and literally was led to his website instead of a retreat center to like grieve, I like took that as this like, no, like this is it, like you're the one, like and I was really in that space of like, that extreme spirituality where like everything's a sign and like everything, like, which we still feel that way, but I was like really I was saying more naive in that sense than I am now, a little bit more ungrounded in it, where I was more willing to make rash decisions and like upheaval my life for
for the sake of it.
Yes, totally. Like I was I had so much faith.
We were like ready to walk into the desert type of thing.
I would do crazy things if I got the sign type of thing. Yeah.
We both were. So like when we felt like it was a sign, I called her, and then I was like, well, look, dude, like you have this boyfriend and I can't talk to you anymore because I'm like, I love you and I know I want to be with you. So you really need to decide, like, because I can't keep going at this point because it feels inappropriate. So we need to decide. And sure enough, she was
talked
like
on the phone one time, and that's what he told me.
And this is all I told her the first call, because I'm talking to her, so it officially felt inappropriate. And I was like, hey, to be respectful.
And I said, done.
Yeah, I said, to be respectful, like I can't be calling you, like this is the one and only time. You're either gonna, like, we need to decide now, because this is I feel like I can't start a relationship out of disrespect like this. It doesn't feel right. So I told her, we can't talk if you stay with him.
And the only reason we were even still together is because I avoid confrontation, and I just did not have the guts to break up. I was like,
hey everybody, we just wanted to take a minute and push pause real quick to thank you for being here and listening to the Steph and Craig Show. We know there's a lot of options out there when it comes to podcasts, and we are incredibly grateful that you chose us. The things that we have heard on podcasts have helped both of us in our healing journey. So we believe that they're incredibly powerful, and we have an important mission with this podcast that we need your help with. Head over to YouTube and search out The Steph and Craig Show. Be sure to click on the subscribe button, and don't forget about the little bell for those notifications so that you don't miss an episode. One other thing you can do is share it with somebody, whether it's this episode you're listening to right now or one of the other episodes that you've really enjoyed. We love you, we care about you, and we're on a mission to help you create better relationships and live your best life, because we believe we all do better when we heal together. Now let's get back to the show.
Like that was such a courageous moment for me to break up with somebody and like confront them. Like that was just something I would never do. Like I would probably still be with that person because I could just never, I couldn't initiate something. I would avoid
Yeah.
confrontation till my death. And so him coming into my life actually helped liberate me and be like, you have to say what you want. You have to say the uncomfortable thing. You have to be honest. Like what are
clearly
you
don't wanna
doing?
be
You can't
with
just be
him.
this
Yeah.
passive person that
Yeah.
isn't truthful because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And so it was really an interesting invitation for me at that time to like, are you going to just be this, you know, chicken shit, or are you gonna like
you're gonna
you're gonna do something about
like,
it?
come on, like,
and
I'm
I
right
did,
here.
and he gave me that courage to be like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like do it.
Yeah. So it was really cute to her testament though. After that call, she was like, okay, I'm gonna go meditate on this. And she said she went into her yoga room for like 6 hours, was just in there, you know, processing, meditating on it, doing whatever she needed to do. And she walked out and was like, okay, I'm doing it. And then I think texted me and said, like that day, like the end of that day was like, okay, I'm doing it, I'm leaving. And I was like,
doesn't
whoa.
sound very good now looking back. Like I don't recommend this to people.
I think
but so beautiful though.
It is beautiful.
The whole thing, like, I just want to highlight so many different things that you like. It's really, really beautiful. I know that because we have like this beautiful love story that we can look at from one lens and one perspective, and then we shift just slightly, and we're like, holy cow, this is so toxic. This is so terrible. There's so many things about this that were, you know, all of that stuff. But the reality is, like, it's still beautiful.
So
I'm sitting here thinking about, like, because not even just like the points in your life where you're seeking out and looking for answers and finding truth, but like the duality of Ash literally being like raised in Sin City, right? Like Las Vegas, world renowned for all of those things. Matt being raised in like religion to the point where, you know, those two polar opposite things pushing each of you towards each other in some ways, right? Having to get that nudge, and all of it is so beautiful.
Where it looks like it was going to push you was in completely opposite directions.
Right.
Yeah, there's a story, Ash, where you're still working on the strip, and it's not at the Marquee, right? It's not at one of those high-end places. There's a story, there's an alternate dimension where this doesn't turn out this way.
Right.
Where Matt, you're down the path.
I say you're so like, you should have turned out like a drug addict or something. Like there's so many other paths she could have went, and it is interesting. I mean, me too, but her story especially, I'm like, babe, you don't even realize the generational karma you just annihilated. Like you could have turned out a million other ways. This doesn't make any sense.
And the fact that both of you met, like you're the same age, and then you started doing this like at the same age. Ash is 16 and going to every religion and like really asking these questions. And Matt's like, this doesn't align with me, and going into college at 15. So like at that same age, you're both still
seeking information. Give me more, give me truth. I need answers
to this journey.
Get me out of this place that I've been in. I need more. I need more. I need more. It's fucking beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And you both had to like the extremity of where you're looking at it now, and you're like, this is where we were, like you were saying, the delusional. I mean, that was from what it looks like to me, and this is just my point of view on your story, so take it or leave it. It doesn't have to be yours, but it is so beautiful on the fact that you had to get to that level. You had to reach, like literally for the stars, reach for the heavens, reach for everything to come to that, to pull you together. And it's so beautiful that you were brave enough and courageous enough to be that wild and be that trusting to go there. It's just like, I'm loving the story. And then you find each other.
I think one thing that sometimes we have a habit of throwing ourselves under the bus on accident, but I think a better word that resonates, I don't resonate with delusional per se. I would say we were ridiculously faithful, so much so that we were like I joked about earlier, we were like, God, I will do whatever you tell me. I guess that you could, I guess you like to call that delusional. I would say it's like fanatical.
Yes.
It's like we were like spiritual fanatics. We were like, God, I'll go into the desert for 40 days if you gave me a sign. I'll try it. Like that's it. And I guess you could call it delusional, but I think it's more of like, we were just so like in love. We were God drunk. We were in love with God. We were like obsessed with God. We wanted to know God. We wanted to know divine. We wanted to know truth. And that's why I would say, I don't know if that's delusional or if it's just, it's love drunk. It's like you just love something so much. You want to know it inside and out.
I want to see if this resonates with you, because I had this, I mean, it's for me, my own personal realization not too long ago is, I mean, in some ways I relate so much with this idea of wanting an answer, right? Help me understand, like, not just what the point of it is and all of these different things, and constantly seeking and questioning and always looking for more answers and more answers and more answers. And I realized at some point, and I mean, this was like probably within the last week or so, where a lot of that was also coming from this place of I didn't fit. I didn't belong. Everywhere I went, I didn't fit in my family. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere, no matter what it was like. All my friend groups, all that, every job, all these kind of different avenues and places and things like that. I just never fit. I never felt at home and at peace within myself. And so it's just this constant yearning to find that like real, true, unconditional love at the end of the day, but also all of those pieces that made sense and helped me understand why I was the way that I was, as well as why I am, where I'm at and how I am and all those kind of different things. Is there any part of it too that you can relate to that, either one of you?
Well, I think that's how I would describe any craving of truth in God, is that you're actually just craving to feel loved. You're just craving to know how loved you are, to know the truth of that you are eternally loved. I think that anyone's desire to know God and to know truth is to know true love. I think that's when you said that immediately, I was like, oh, that's a way better way to put it. That is the underpinning of any craving of truth, is you're craving to know the truth of how loved you are and your real identity as divine love.
I think all of this is true. And the only reason I say it was delusional is, yes, like we were seeking some, like I definitely didn't fit in Vegas, and I didn't feel like I fit in with my family. And you obviously didn't with your religion. And I was seeking to feel like, where are my people? Where are the people who see the world the way I see it, and want to live like, in this more, higher consciousness way, of self-inquiry and becoming self-aware and like doing better for the world and for ourselves. And I wasn't finding that where I was. And I was definitely looking for a community. That's why I was going to all these different churches, or like you said, some answers. And I think the only reason I say it was like delusional is because at that level of life experience and self-esteem development, it was unbalanced because I hadn't found that within myself. Like now, because of that experience, like I'm so grateful for it, because it has led me to the grounded nature that I feel now. I ironically had to go through the extreme ends of the spectrum to find that balance and that inner stability. And the only reason I say it was more delusional is because it was just an earlier, it's like
Balance.
Yeah, it's like looking at yourself as a teenager or as a child and realizing the decisions you made weren't from a grounded, centered place, but they were also necessary for you to arrive at that grounded, centered place. And so I kind of see it in that way. Like it was innocent, it was naive, it was extreme, and also it led me to the place that, I'm at today, which means it was completely necessary for me to lose balance, which is so interesting because I think as a yogi, we have this like aversion to losing our balance. Like, we can be hard on ourselves when we are not in a healthy eating routine or a healthy, meditation and physical exercise, regimen, or like just a healthy balance in our day to day. We spend too much time on social media, or we just lose ourselves in our healthy habits a little bit, and we can be down on ourselves. But the irony is like losing balance is what brings you into balance. And like I can reflect on my own life and see that in so many ways of like every single time I was so off balance, that is what taught me balance. And
paradoxes.
So yeah.
And the irony too is as you were showing our the contrast, the polarities of our life story. I don't know if that has anything to do with our karma of being two Libras together too. So we have a tendency to do this thing a lot where we totally off balance each other, or offset and balance each other. So like it is weird. I'm raised in extreme discipline and strictness. She's raised in complete freedom. Like, come on. I'm raised in a strict, like religious routine. She's raised with no religion. Like we do notice these strange polarities where we try to balance each other out. And maybe that has to do with our astrology karma and the type of people we are. But yeah, and then sure enough, of course, we're in the path where it's all about the middle way. Like, so maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe not everybody needs balance. Maybe it's just us.
I love that connecting the dot version that you just took us through. That was like a very, very peaceful way to pull it all together in that space. And The paradox that you're always in, not the paradox, but the extremes, the one end of the spectrum and the other, bringing you together. It's very cool. It's very cool.
So take us through, we meet, we fall in love, we start building our life together. We open up yoga studio. I shouldn't say we, obviously we didn't. You guys open up a yoga studio. We go through all of these different things. At what point, because there's always this beautiful honeymoon phase of relationships where everything is great and wonderful and magical. And then for us, it was about 2 or 3 years in where everything just starts to kind of really start opening up in regards to all of the coping mechanisms and the patterns and the traumas and all those kind of different things. And so what did that phase look like for you guys? Because I know looking back now, you can see it much differently than it was when you were going through it.
Yeah, so Matt moves to Vegas and I had just purchased a yoga franchise. I did what I said I was going to do. I saved all the money from the cocktailing. I quit and I had enough money to purchase this franchise to build a hot yoga studio. And Matt,
and then right away, yeah, like it's funny too, like again, this I could see is delusional imbalance or imbalance, and dangerous is like, yeah, like 3 months in, we join bank accounts. I say, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. I'll work, you go do this. And we immediately become a team. That's why, like, in my opinion, I feel like we've been married like after 2 months of meeting each other, because essentially we shared money, we shared everything. And I could see how, yeah, that I wouldn't recommend
that. No.
Like, you know, like I don't, you know, I think there's some more prudence that now with my maturity, I would counsel someone to not do that.
Matt
but that's
became
what we did.
Essentially the sole provider.
Yeah.
And he worked at the school I was working at. I was a preschool teacher. He became an elementary teacher. There was like a little bit of an overlap. I quit cocktailing and we were both working at the same school together for a minute. And then once we felt stable enough, I quit the school. He continued working there and I started opening this yoga studio. So right away, like within a couple months of our relationship, we are already business partners. We already share money. We are literally starting a business. He just moved cities.
I just got to a new city that was extremely overstimulating compared to my country background.
Yeah. So he's in Vegas for the first time without parental supervision.
To whining and dining at all times.
His eyes are like,
I'm like, where am I? This is candy shop.
Yeah. So he comes into the Matrix, and I'm like, welcome, and like he's just like, where am I?
She kept me.
I'm like taking him all over Vegas, showing him everything. It's, you know, and he had such little experience.
I was extremely sheltered.
He's very sheltered. And
some country, small town, strict religion, just super sheltered.
I came to realize that once we moved in together, like he was very sheltered. And so like things that I was just used to seeing every day, he is like never been exposed to. Like just strip clubs everywhere and just like
I'd never even like seen a strip. I was like, I thought those were only in movies.
Yeah, like
or like a billboard of basically
like they're
a
hidden
naked
somewhere
woman on the street. I'm like, wow,
they're
you can
everywhere.
do that? That's really crazy.
Yeah. So he was just like, what the hell? Like, where am I? And the first challenges I think that, you know, we started to experience, I mean, we were in a honeymoon phase, I think, with like opening the studios. We were on cloud nine. We were so proud of ourselves. We were so excited. But immediately, like, there's stress with that. Like, we had rent, we had, you know, bills, and we were in a commercial building. I mean, this was like a really big deal. I had a business partner, and there was a lot of drama, like, right away with opening this studio and us being so new into our relationship. And I think that this is where the inner work first book like really starts, is because right then and there we start to realize and notice like each other's coping mechanisms, unhealed wounds. Like, you know, I'm always scared that he wants to leave or he's going to give up when things get hard. He has like guilt and judgment wounds where he's just constantly like, you know, hard on himself or on me for not being perfect or doing
things don't go perfect
or doing things a specific way. All this stuff is just coming out like in the day to day. And granted, thank God, we both had the same philosophy of self-realization, yoga, like self-awareness. Like we both already came into the relationship. We had a whole blog about it. I was already a yoga teacher. I'm opening a yoga studio. We knew this stuff already.
We talked about it right away.
But the difference is we had not been tested in it.
Yeah,
we could talk about it all day long.
Implement, it was still theory for both of us, and that's what I think why we're so passionate about all of our work now, is because it forced us to become masters of implementation and practicality. these things are all so cool and they feel great as a theory, and they make you feel so good as a theory, but it's another thing to actually implement and then put it into practice. And I think that's what these last 10 years have been about, is like, how do we take the first 20 years of our life, the wisdom and the seeking and the discovery, but now how do we actually actualize it? How do we internalize it? How do we make this real? And it's not just knowledge, but it's wisdom.
So we got the opportunity, like on a daily basis, to basically hold each other accountable to like, wait, like, are you the spiritual guru online that I found? And it's like, are you the yoga teacher Zen girl that like I found? Because like, this is the presentation that we have and that we see ourselves as. But behind closed doors, when things are hard, when money is getting involved, when there's stress and there's responsibilities and there's, you know, cooperation that needs to take place, are we those people in those situations? Do we even know how to be? And I think that what Matt and I gave each other was an opportunity to become the people we saw ourselves as and that we wanted to be. Like, it was true. Like, who I saw myself as was true, and who he saw himself as is true. But when we first met each other, we were not those people yet. Our relationship created the incubator that helped us actually ripen into the people that we wanted to be.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying at the very beginning of when we started, of we had the vision, but we didn't realize that just these last couple of weeks we were reflecting on how now we're really becoming that vision 10 years later. And it's like, oh man, well, I'm so proud of us to holding true to our values and vision, but wow, did it take a lot more than we thought to actually become it.
I want to highlight that. I think that is so, like what you just said, Ash, that your relationship became the incubator for you to become the versions of you that you wanted to be. I think that's really, really powerful. And I think that a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people actually look at their relationship that way, right? When Steph and I first met, we had this beautiful love story that was like beautifully intricately connected with spirituality. And we had like these out of body experiences together where we could tap in and feel the versions of us throughout space. Like, we had all of these really beautiful experiences, and then bringing it back down into like the reality. And this fire that we've gone through over the past 12 years together is what created the versions of that. And I think that that's really, really beautiful. And I'm glad that you said it, because I think oftentimes people get into relationships thinking that like they glimpse that together, right? They glimpse the version of themselves that they want to become, or they glimpse the version of their partner that their partner wants to become, because we present those, you know, you put on that facade in the beginning, you put on those masks and things like that. And then it's like, cool, you saw it, you got a glimpse of it. Now, can you actually come together where the rubber meets the road and do what you need to do to become those people and to become the versions of you that you actually want to become?
100%. And that's what the inner worker relationships was all about, is really helping people see that concept. And when we eventually talk about that book, like that is literally the entire foundation of why we wrote it, was to help translate that concept of like, everybody thinks that like when you date, you get to be that perfect version. And that's what we fall in love with. But what happens over time, like you just said, is that was just a glimpse, and to actualize that person now takes all of the work. So that's why it's the inner worker relationships, because it's like, yeah, everybody can be their best self for a couple dates. Like, yeah, I can, you know, we can all be pretty perfect for a couple nights. It's like, but what about years, months, you know, weeks of stress or issues or setbacks? That's when it really is a great chance to see what you're really made of.
I think what started happening like in our relationship is we started to realize that the daily challenges that we were facing, being newly moved in, not knowing each other that well, we didn't have the average dating experience that most people have. Combining our finances, opening a business, and like, you know, starting a life together that quickly, is that these daily challenges that we were experiencing together, we both knew and understood that this was the yoga, this was the work. And if we were actually practicing the things that we proclaim we're so interested in and, you know, devoted to, then this is what it actually looks like. And we figured that out pretty quickly on. And from that moment on, we had this commitment between us, like, oh, our relationship is our practice. Like, this relationship is our yoga practice. This relationship is the gateway to our enlightenment. This relationship is the simulation. And so there was an opportunity there where in our ego, is this all a presentation? Like, is this all just, another ego identity where you're just interested in these things because it's, it's better than where you came from or better than everybody else? And like, you like to know these things and talk about these things and portray these things? Or are you genuinely interested in this path for the results of the practice, because you genuinely believe in the internal results that this practice brings you of self-awareness and self-inquiry? And I think we both had a moment to like reflect on that, like truly, because it was way harder than we thought it was when we were just learning about it. And there's a moment where you can break up there and be like, you know what, whatever. And I don't even care what you think about me. I don't care if you think I'm a
false guru
or a spiritual narcissist, or I'm full of shit, or I'm delusional, right? Like, I don't care what you think about me. I'll just move on and find somebody else, and they'll think the world of me, right? I don't care what you think. There's like this ego switch right there of like, is that going to be who you are? Or are you going to let somebody see you for who you really are? Be humble. Are you actually going to go down the road and like go through the simulation, which is like, now a lifetime of it. And I think we both had that moment, and we both chose to continue to do the work.
And this is where I think faith comes in, because on any healing journey, you have to have faith to be willing to do what Ash just said. You have to believe that the outcome's going to be worth it. And both of us believed, because again, that passion, that faith we had was like, yes, I will see where this leads. I'm courageous enough to see where this leads. And if it all ends, and if it's a false teaching, if it doesn't work, at least I'll know, because I tried it and I did it. And so I think both of us had that passion to be like, let's see if this yoga shit's real. Let's see if this enlightenment stuff's real. Let's actually work on this stuff together. And the outcome should be what we hope it to be. And if it's not, at least we'll know. And I think that helped us feel the faith, the courage to be like, we have nothing to lose.
I think one other realization was we realized we needed each other, because if I didn't have him in my life holding me accountable with the amount of awareness and knowledge he had, I could trick myself all day long about how spiritual and peaceful and grounded and centered and like enlightened choices I make, and like how I know all these things. It's within the partnership that he holds up a mirror and really shows me when like I'm not being accountable to the self-reflection that I am saying I am doing, right? And same with him. It was like, I think he had a realization like, oh my gosh, I thought I was enlightened. I'm going to leave my body. And yet this woman is in front of me holding up a mirror, showing me all of these blind spots of egoism. And we both had it. And I think we realized that like, if we were genuinely devoted to this, like transcendence and like, letting go of the suffering and actually understanding and seeing like what he said, is it really true? Is it really real? What's on the other side? I think there was a moment of realizing like, holy shit, I kind of need you, because like you hold me accountable. You point out my shit. Like you see me, and like my ego is seen. And and then we became to love each other for that. And everybody, like we said, everybody needs a teacher, everybody needs a guru for that reason, not for somebody to tell you what to do or for somebody to give you the knowledge or direct you, but just a friend. A guru could be a friend, guru could be a partner, guru could be anybody that you're interacting with in life that you allow to be a mirror for you to show you your own stuff. And so when we had that switch of honoring each other in that way, it started this whole journey that, where we're at today.
Yeah, I was going to add to that too earlier when you were saying like, this is when we really realized like, oh, you're my teacher. And I've spent like every day, and any chance I can to give Ash all the credit for any greatness in my potential that I've unlocked is 100% because of her. And I understand that it's maybe a little too much. Like, obviously I have to give myself credit. Okay. Like, yes, it took courage to do what I did, but at the end of the day, I know that any of the wonderful qualities that I'm proud of that I've become is 100% because of her being a part of that journey. And I couldn't have done it without her. And I think it's an honest, humble thing to admit, because in any other timeline, I don't know what would have happened. I just know this timeline. And in this timeline, the only reason why I've achieved anything that I'm proud of is because of having her in my life. And it's I think that's scary to people. And this, as we've looked at relationships and talked about relationships for so long now, and written a book about it now, is I think people are scared to trust and put that much power in their partner's heart. Is a good way to put it, instead of hands. I like that, but it's like, yeah, I'm putting all that love and trust. And something that Ash was just saying, it made me think that was the moment where our love became the biggest love it could ever be. Because if you let someone be your spiritual companion, and you let them be your teacher, and you trust them with that level of love, I mean, there is no greater love than to give someone your full respect for your spiritual well-being. That's the most profound trust you could put in someone.
And when two people are doing that, that's why it's not risky, because you're both making that same commitment together. It's not like one person has more power over the other.
Yeah, it's mutual.
And I think that's where the fear comes in.
And I think we're so afraid to do that, but it's like, if you want to know true love, you have to, which again, true love takes faith, true love takes courage
and surrender
because of that. Real quick, I wanted to say something too about your original question of when did it all start and all that. Something interesting, and this just might be interesting for you to hear. My recollection of it was, Ash, I feel like her stuff, like, in all honesty, like the way I feel, it's like, weirdly enough, I have had this observation that like one partner kind of goes first. And I think that my shit all came up first right away. And it's like I had to heal first. And another part of my theory and observation on this is that whoever is the more destructive one has to go first. So like I'm the shame and guilt one. So like my shit will destroy us the quickest because it's so nasty and it's so dark and it will push the relationship apart really quickly. Hers is more like fear and anxiety. It's not as destructive as mine. So when we look at themes of consciousness, my theory has been the partner who has the most dense or like destructive theme, the lower the theme is, that person has to heal first. And whoever has the higher theme, they'll heal next because their stuff isn't even relevant yet. And so in order for Ash to heal, I have to heal first because her work isn't even relevant yet until we're safe from my shit, from my demons. So this is just a theory or an observation I've had. And especially when I counsel couples, I've also observed this. It's just this thing I've just noticed. And so Ash, I feel like her healing and her coping mechanisms and her like stuff that was hurting the relationship, I feel like was the second half, like the last 5 years, her stuff really was prominent. But like my stuff came up, back to your original question. I have memories of my nasty judgment shit coming up like day one. I have these sad memories of projecting my mom. I remember this night where I told her, I just feel like my mom's going to think this and this about you, and she's going to say this. And I was basically vomiting the judgment wound from my mom through my own mouth onto Ash. And I was still naive, not realizing that like I'm basically doing it in an indirect way. So it hurt her and she's crying. It was this sad night. And I remember then that was my humbling moment of like, despite all my intention to be different from my parents, I am them still. I'm doing the same shit. And I hated this about my mom. I hated this quality about her. I still to this day. I mean, I have a great relationship with them, but if there's one quality about them that hurt me the most, it was this. And so it was ironic that I accidentally became it too, and it was a blind spot. And so I remember the first like few years of our relationship, this judgment wound came out, this shame wound, things needing to be perfect. me having all these judgments of what my mom's going to think of Ash and how people are going to judge us. And I was super nitpicky over how we behaved, how we talked, how we looked, how we did things, because we were very public. And so that's a perfect recipe for judgment, because you're going to nitpick everything. So mine came out right away. And I think we spent the first massive chunk of our relationship just getting me level-headed, just getting me out of that, me getting to be more free, getting to be more balanced, letting go of judgment, and getting to see the damage it was causing, and Ash having the courage to embrace that for me. That's why, again, I honor her, because here's a trippy thing about healing shame and judgment that I feel called to say. It takes the most courageous soul to help that person heal, because the level of toxicity and abuse you have to endure for that person to heal is like, I wouldn't ask that of anybody. It's a big ask. And that's why I'm so grateful to Ash, and I'll always give her so much credit in my heart forever, so long as I like breathe, is because what it took to let me heal that was all that nasty shit. She had to go through that. She had to be a container for that. She had to help me process that. And what that required is this, sometimes taking it out on her. And it's so sad. And that's why I was saying in the beginning of this, like, it's so crazy. Like, I don't want to remember this part of myself, but at the same time, I get it. I embrace him. I understand him. He was wounded, but it is interesting in a relationship for there to be mutual love. It's almost like you're trusting each other to love each other through your worst. And that's what makes the bond so strong. But it also is, it's really, it can be hard. So that, I think, and then I think one other big pivot I remember in my recollection is after a couple more studios and things not panning out the way we envisioned, man, did my stuff really start to come out. And I'm looking for someone to blame. I'm like, why the fuck isn't this working how we envisioned it? We're like aligned, we're spiritual, everything should be working beautifully. This is why we have so many issues with the manifest movement and law of attraction, is because that belief system fucked me up, because I thought, hey man, come on, my vibe's good. Is it your vibe? Is your frequency off? You're fucking it up. Why is this happening? We shouldn't be going through setbacks. And so like 4 years in after the second studio closing, or us leaving the second studio and the business partnerships, it really came out. And I just really started to be like, what is going on? Like, are we not the right person? Are we not the right match? And I think that's when you really get challenged to see it through, is when you really start to question your partner. That can also simultaneously be the breakthrough and pivot to you guys truly falling in love. It's ironic. It's always paradoxes and ironies. It's like the moment you are finally thinking like, is it you? And then a healing moment happens. You go, wait, or is it me? And am I just projecting the problem onto you? And it's really me. And it's like, oh shoot, maybe it's really me. Like, maybe I need to look at something. So I just wanted to say, like, that was my big take on it. And then I feel like once that stuff was cleared for me, Ash was, we could actually address her stuff. And now that's what we've been really healing. And I've been able to be a safe container for her. So it's kind of cute. You have to be like this safe container, because see, she doesn't have this shame and guilt wound. So she's able to process it. It doesn't really stick to her as much. And likewise, I don't have her fear wounds. I don't have that issue. Like, so I'm like, yo, we're good. Like, I was raised a different way. So it's fascinating how partnerships, you'll notice that sometimes you have the skill and the maturity to handle the thing they're working on, and vice versa. And so it's almost like this exchange of reparenting. It's kind of beautiful of how that can happen.
I think this is a perfect place to push pause. That's incredibly beautiful. We could spend another half hour resonating with everything that you just got done saying. That's definitely. Go ahead, Bim.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I've got something to say. But go ahead.
But that was the case in our relationship for sure. My shit was, it was a lot for both of us to try to carry and navigate together. And the way that you just articulated that, Matt, and I can relate 100% to that. And it's only within probably we've had a lot of the last 2 years of our life have been, let's see, it's 2024. Yeah, last 2 or 3 years of our life have just been massively healing and uncovering and processing and deep, deep work. And it's only now within probably the last year or so that I've really been able to get my head above water and see how clearly Stephanie has done exactly what you just described, like being able to sit and hold that space and take all of that shit. And there's something about that that is really, really magical and special and amazing. And like, I haven't done the best job of acknowledging that and expressing that because I've been too deeply into my own stuff and navigating my own healing and looking at things. And I mean, truthfully, it's like, it's unreal what you did for me as well as for like the greater us, and the ability to just kind of like weather the storm and the fucking like hurricane that was nonstop. But yeah, go, babe, real quick. So then because we're going to come back for part 2, but before we come back, go ahead, babe.
I think the candidness of that, and it's so important for people to hear that a lot of times when you get into that relationship, like, so just pull it back at that beginning, and it's, you are bringing your best self forward, and it's who you believe, at least for me, it's who I thought I was able to be now. It's who I thought I was going to be able to show up as. It's who I thought I was no longer being held back by these triggers and these pain and these wounds. And so the me that I showed myself, that I showed Craig, is who I thought, oh, I get to be this person now. I get to be, and then all of the wounds come up and all of the shit that I haven't dealt with surface. And now that mirroring happens. And I think that's where so many people get stuck, is like, oh, this isn't who I thought you were. This isn't who I thought I was. And now, instead of giving that opportunity to heal together and make that choice, like, we're going to do this together, it's where they're like, you aren't who you said you were, and I don't like me with you. So now I'm done. And they just stop there. And when people, like, I know I've had people reach out to me, and as people that know, they're like, there's no way you've gone through what you've talked about. I'm like, we have absolutely gone through what we've talked about and far more. It's hard to see that somebody makes that choice. So they think, oh, it's just always been perfect. You guys have just always been spiritually enlightened and divine and pulled together. You have always had great communication. And I'm like, we still don't have great communication. We're still trying. We try every day. And so just like hearing that it's a choice that you make continually every day. And it's like, I like that you said the ridiculousness. And it's like, we do that radicalness. You do have to be ridiculous. You do have to be radical. You have to be willing to get it wrong and try again. And I love the way that you just showed the choice of it. I'm losing my words. I'm so moved right now that I'm not having the words, but it doesn't, amazing relationships aren't just because it's an amazing relationship. They're because you've worked at it and you've been willing to look at the wounds, and you've likely gone through some things that are really, really, really difficult and have the possibility to take you out, take the relationship out and end, and you chose something different. And I'm not talking about enduring abuse. So I don't want somebody to hear that and think that if they're in a very physically abusive relationship that they just need to endure it. I'm not saying that. And that is like, get yourself to safety. This is not that conversation. But to know that sometimes things get really hard and really scary and wounds come out, and you are not your best self and your partner is not their best self. And you have a choice to make at that point on how you want to proceed together.
So I'm excited. We're coming back. Everybody stick around for part 2 with Matt Nash, where we get into the inner work, their books. I want to know about, because there's so much that I want to know about. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, you two. And yeah, we just get to stick around, everybody. So stay tuned, because here comes part 2, and not too long from now.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait and see, you and me, we were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.